right, here we go. So I'm going to be playing the lost tape, so to speak. It was the last rescue I did, and I'm going to do a live reaction to it because I never watched it. Funny how that is. I don't really like watching my own material. This last rescue attempt that I did was filmed by a different production company, and it was intended to go out on production of the series, but of a new series after Escape to Chimp Eden. I think the format and the style of the show that the producers had in mind might not have, worked with audiences, and at least from a commissioning editor perspective, it was a little bit difficult for them to see the future of this style of show. I can imagine that. And the second thing was that I don't really think I was in the right headspace to continue on with rescue missions. So there was a combination of factors, I think, that didn't see this project from progressing any further than what the show was covering in the rescue of Claudine. So let's watch it together, and then I'll give my commentary and stop where I have to. Kind of like the intro music.
Central African Republic,
Online.
with its capital
Looks neat.
Bangui, one of the most underdeveloped countries in the world. Ravaged by civil wars, this former French colony hosts some appalling living conditions. Rebel forces still operate unimpeded in a country rife with instability, and for most of the locals, every day is a struggle for survival.
So, factually that was correct. There was a conflict going on in the region there with remnants of, I think it was the Malacca rebels or something like that, but it was remnants of the Lord's Resistance Army that was still operating in and out of the region. And for those of you that don't know how it's not really geopolitics, but it is, you got to think of Africa in a little bit of different terms if you would Europe or America, one of those places. The fact is that the conflicts have always been happening on the African continent. Any given time, there's several conflicts going on. Right now, we've got genocide level warfare going on in Sudan, and in what other country is it? I believe. Where is the other country that it's happening right now? Nigeria as well. So any given time you could have something like a half a dozen wars going on, or even more. So this again, coming back to something that I said earlier in one of my podcasts, was that the reasoning behind the sanctuary was specifically to build a sanctuary in a stable economy that we could move the animals out of a conflict zone, and then one day they could possibly return, or they could be released into the wild. At least my dream was to see that happen, was to see them being returned to the wild. So like I said, Lord's Resistance Army was on the fringes of the city, or the Malacca rebels. So I can't remember exactly what the term was, but right after we left here, major conflict broke out, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think that what is important about this situation here is the fact that when these types of conflicts are happening in and around capitals or on the surrounding landscapes, you can imagine that the peacekeeping forces and the army and the police, everyone is in a heightened is at a heightened state. And the problem is that access to and in and out of these places diminishes to a large extent, or the rule of law breaks down to a large extent as the authorities are trying to focus on the conflict rather than dealing with wildlife and conservation issues and things like that. So this wasn't an easy trip to go and do. There was no commercial flight for us to get into Bangui to get to do the chimpanzee rescue. So I enlisted the help of a friend of mine with a charter company, brand new PC-12, a Pilatus PC-12 aircraft. I'm a pilot myself. He was one of my friends. that operated out of Uganda, and I was able to enlist his help to charter the aircraft and get it into Bangui to get us in and out of the place.
But it's not only humans that are suffering.
I've come to Bangui here in Central African Republic because I'm told it's one of the places where wildlife is under enormous pressure. With the numbers of the great apes pointing towards future extinction, I've come here to see exactly what is the size of the problem, the pressures that are impacting, and what can be done. I'm also here to rescue a victim of the endangered species trade. These are the animals under pressure.
Well, you gotta appreciate the enthusiasm. I still, what happened to that guy? Two things there. That shot I remember specifically was a one take shot that we had. The cameraman was sitting on a trolley, and the director was was pulling the cameraman and not even be able to look behind him, and that crowd of people. Now, you can't film in these countries. It's pretty illegal. It's just that, they don't like filming. It's a former colonial and region that most of these countries just, the population and the cultures are of such nature that they just don't like filming. And a lot of these countries have made it illegal to film. And the police exploit that to a large extent. So if they catch you, they're going to extort heavy bribes out of you. Mostly what we used to do in these cases is, we would go to the police, we'd ask them for permission, and they most likely say no, and we say, listen, well, how much is it going to cost to do it? Because that is just the language, what no means for them. It's not that it's illegal to film necessarily, in public not. If you were going to film military facilities and that kind of stuff, that would be illegal. But the police would be looking for people like you or to try and exploit you for money. So we would enlist, we'd try and get permission. I believe on this trip we did get permission to be there and to do a production, but we were nevertheless worried about being extorted and we'd have to pay bribes. So we had a letter and we had a policeman with us, but you wanted to get in and out and do this as quickly as possible, because if you draw more attention, and this actually did happen on the specific trip, it drew the attention of other elements of the police that weren't working with us, and the authorities, and the conservation officials. You'll see them later in the video. They were helping us in this effort, and the attention, because they weren't on board or weren't involved in this, didn't get a bribe or something like that, they made a big scene of it, and it just puts a lot of pressure on it. So not easy to film in these places, Here's the trolley right there at the back. There's if I pause the right place, there's the little trolley that we used. We just hired it from one of the locals there. I don't know why we just left it there in the back of the street while we pulled off. Maybe that was the scene where the police were trying to usher us on or something like that. Just get out of here. I can't remember exactly what happened there, but funny enough, you go back in the video, you'll see that there. But yeah.
Investigation in a small town called Likaya. Now that's about 9 hours drive from here.
Wow, 13 hours.
And even more so in the rainy season. Now this town is also home to a closed down mining facility where a young chimpanzee, Claudine, is being kept. I would really like to see her rescued, and therefore we're going to have to take blood samples as soon as we get there. That has to be sent to a laboratory in the Netherlands. And that's why I've enlisted the help of Dr. Stephen van der Spey from the Johannesburg Zoo.
Stephen with his poker face.
Leaving
was a
Bangui,
really good vet.
the nearly 400-kilometer journey towards Likaya, a small village in the east, starts. Along the way, the poor and desperate living conditions are evident. Looking at the villages and landscape next to the road, it's hard to see how the people here are surviving. Apart from the odd goat and chickens, there's almost no evidence of agriculture, although the soil here is fertile.
Pause there. All right, so these rainforest regions, it's so rich with what it produces, what mangoes and bananas and things like that. They got different versions of, for example, the wild banana. I don't know what the scientific name for it is, but it's a different one that you've got to cook before you can eat it. But it's just some examples of how rich this environment is. A lot of people just live off the land, the fruits that the forest produces. Yes, bushmeat is to a certain extent something that they consume, but it's more for cultural reasons. Goats and chickens and things like that, yeah, that's definitely what they farm with them. Funny enough, the very first meal I had when we stopped after that horrendous drive, it was something between 13 and 15 hours worth of driving. My very first meal was goat. You're not asking any questions. You're traveling light. There's no wait. It was just people taking care of us there at the mining camp. So yeah, eventually I found out it was goat. But I mean, if you're a vegetarian, you're shit out of luck, because there's no waiter coming out with a menu that's going to give you options of some Greek salad, or you got to toughen it up, man. We're gonna go hungry. You're definitely gonna slave away. It's incredibly humid. It's incredibly hot. And the people, like I said, this is what they mostly consume in the rainforest regions, because they don't have so much of the beef farming here, of cattle farming here. That is more in the Sudan region and those places. So yeah, that was my first meal.
The instability as a result of the war and a colonial past has forced the people to live on whatever they can find, but has destroyed organized development.
Heading off towards the east, towards the west.
Gem Diamond's facilities at Likaya meant a hot meal, a shower and a deserving rest before meeting Claudine in the morning.
This is the morning of day 3. Claudine is just around the corner, and we're going to meet her for the first time this morning.
Claudine is...
Break myself there. The conflict that broke out eventually was on the eastern side of the city, and we were heading towards the west, so we were not heading towards where the action was happening. And I guess that there was zero traffic. We didn't see one car on that road, or one truck, or anything moving on that road for 13 hours. I can't remember seeing one vehicle.
5 years old and was given to the mine as a gift after her mother was killed for the bushmeat trade.
Now, the reason why we haven't actually walked up to her yet is we don't want to make it too excited. This is the morning that we're going to have to take the blood sample. We were hoping to do it yesterday, but unfortunately we only got here very late at night. She was already asleep, and we weren't going to take a chance to do it tonight. So it's imperative that we do this as quickly as possible, take a couple of samples, get Steve back to Bangui as quickly as possible so we can get those blood samples on the DHL plane back. Again? Steve's looking at another 13 hours on the road, so not going to be easy for you. I feel sorry for you. At least I've got a couple of days here. In any event, so the procedure that we're going to be following now is we're going to walk up, we're going to try and make friends with Claudine. From there, we're going to come up with a strategy to...
How young was I?
To give it the anesthetic. So it might either be by hand with an injection, or it's going to be...
Feel that long ago.
It depends on how friendly she is, and if we can get up close to her. If she'll sit up against the bars, we'll try an easier strategy and not freak her out.
Eugene speaks Chimp. Claudine responds immediately to his greetings, a good sign.
For them to have made deal with what they've got. Shipping container, cut out the side, put some bars in. Girls here submitting to me.
A girl?
Although constantly under time pressure,
You're very submissive. She was looking for attention, and she was very submissive and friendly and wanting to be friends, make friends.
Have a look, she's grooming Steve, digging into his hair there. That's part of their socializing behavior. She's already made friends with us, seen that we're not a danger, and now she's going on to the next level, which is just becoming even better friends. Grooming is part of that whole socializing structure that they use.
And a quick pause there. I think, for us humans, most of the facilities I've traveled to is you find very few individuals or experts that actually delve into the science of wanting to communicate or how to communicate with chimpanzees. Maybe they feel embarrassed to try and duplicate the sounds and noises. People like Jane and myself, we've never felt embarrassed about doing that, because by doing it, you are communicating in the correct way. You're being accepted, you're being understood a lot better than trying to communicate as a human, like you would speak to a dog. I mean, you don't go around barking to a dog, do you? But with chimpanzees, it's different. They've got about 32 communications, which is gestures combined with vocalizations. If you combine it the correct way, then you are communicating, and you can actually carry a put it more towards a how would I put it? It's a scaled down type of conversation that you're carrying. It's not very in depth. It's not something like you're going to be reciting poetry in the chimpanzee language. It's not a very detailed, complex language, but the communications are there to be able to bring across whatever is going on, whether there's a threat, whether there's food, whether the food's good, whether they're happy, whether they're sad, whether they want to, whether they've got certain things that they want to draw attention to. So there's a lot of communications that's really important within their environment. And the more complex an animal's communication is, obviously, the better they can do as a society, as a species, if you can call it that, because they can organize themselves better. This is where you get your hierarchy, your structure, and where chimpanzees are more organized when they go hunting in the forest. This is, maybe a good time to bring this up. One of the conversations I had with Dr. Goodall was the fact that she was privy to some research that was done at some point about the fact that why the chimpanzees eat or go on hunting trips, and there was science that pointed towards the fact that every 21 days, about every 3 weeks, the chimpanzees would start organizing themselves into a hunting party and then go after threats to their environment, to their territory. So it could be other forms of other monkeys, or it could be other groups of chimpanzees, or something like that, something that they've picked up on. So if they see signs of other chimpanzees that have come into their territory, then it's about 3 weeks, every 21 days. That's what the science determined. And what she said was, it's very much the same with human beings as well. She was admitting to me, speaking from my own experience as a vegetarian, that there's, for every 3 weeks or so, she would feel heightened. She would feel heightened or a stronger sense of aggression. And the science pointed towards the fact that, us as species that are closely related, both chimpanzees and human beings, we are not herbivores, we are omnivores, and we do need protein consumption. So, we would normally, our bodies are built to do that, our guts are built to do that as a species, and so the same with chimpanzees. So they don't necessarily eat meat every day. This is not what they do, but they would every 3 weeks have that heightened sense of aggression. They would organize that hunting party they would go into the jungle. They would share the spoils of whatever they kill, and it's a hierarchy of how they consume that. But they're very organized, and that was what the science pointed towards. I don't know what the conclusion was of that research. It was Jane that was giving me that information. So, in the end, I think that vegetarians would have to adapt to the jungle, if I can put it that way. This is, so I'm just giving a little bit of information when it comes to why chimpanzees are so organized and why they use their language to be effective when it comes to hunting, and why they hunt. So I think that's a little bit of information, if you find it interesting.
Let's move.
Translocating animals from one country to another is a very regulated process so as to prevent the spread of disease.
Usually a combination of ketamine and dormicum.
Test, and that is for Ebola, Marburg, and simian AIDS. And a new addition to our test is the tuberculosis test that we're going to be doing today. We're going to be getting the results rather quickly. I think in a couple of minutes we should have the result of the TB. And if it's positive, it means we will not be able to take Claudine back to South Africa.
Claudine realizes that Eugene and Steve are up to something and tries her best to figure out what it is.
I'm very clever that way. It's almost like they can smell veterinarian. Less about me. I never used to draw negative attention.
Look out for in chimp communication like this is she really excited? Is she really freaked out? And what I'm going to be looking for is vocalizations. I'm also going to be looking at her coat. Is the coat up or down? Her coat is down, so she's calm. She's not vocalizing any warning calls, but she is illustrating a little bit of excited behavior by grabbing some rocks and throwing it towards Steve. So she is irritated with the fact that we are hanging out at a table that is not close to her cage. She can't see exactly what we're doing, and she would obviously love to be part of that whole process.
Steve
Yeah,
decides
so
to play it
here at the
safe and
sanctuary,
use
when the
gun gun.
veterinarians drive in with their vehicle and one of the chimpanzees recognize the vehicle coming in, the vocalizations would start at the first camp and it would run up the hill all the way to chimps that don't even have a visual of the vehicle that's coming in. So chimpanzees are very effective at recognizing threats, and they use that communication to great effect. And they just, if they know what the vets look like, if they know who the vets are, if it's a recurring group of people that you use, like Stephen used to travel to the sanctuary quite often, but also local veterinarians that were on standby for us, they used to use the same transport. And once you get branded as one of the people that'll bring pain, it's not a threat to the chimps. I mean, they don't get hurt in the long term, but getting darted or getting knocked down, that was enough for them to brand someone a problem, and they branded the vets as a problem or as a threat, and that's a stain that continues on, and you don't outlive that. They don't become friendly towards you. They don't forgive you for that. You're not going to make friends if you've been branded as one of the threats.
Now that we've successfully taken the blood samples, I think I'm going to head out and see if I can find any clues to the pressure that caused Claudine to end up in this cage.
Hand injecting, which is so much easier. I don't remember why we opted for the dog gun.
Eugene hitches a ride deeper into the forest to see if he can see some local wildlife.
I think one of the problems that the networks also had with this edit or this style of show is that I wasn't doing the narration myself.
Aware of international pressures and attempts to conserve rainforests, it is also in desperate need of the income that the logging industry provides.
Look at this. There we go. Well, these are figs. And they fall out of the trees after the monkeys have actually consumed them. So this has been lying on the ground for quite some time. There's a few of them, which actually proves that there are monkeys coming through the forest. You know what, you've got to be in absolute awe of this forest when you walk through it. And then you see something like this. Now, I've been tracking through this forest for a couple of hours now, and I'm in absolute awe of it. It is so gorgeous. But then I can't figure out why the animals are missing. I mean, I know there's hunting going on, but I can't find any clues to their existence, that they walk here. There's excrement.
There's about 3,000, if I remember correctly, it's about 3,000 different types of plants and fruits that they can consume. So finding these little clues about picking up figs and things that have been eaten, have been consumed. The chimpanzees would pick up on that. I mean, when I spend time with the wild chimps in Gabon, this is what I notice from them as well, is that they pick up on fruits that have dropped in the tree and have been consumed. So that means other things have come through that area, and that comes back to my point about why or who they know who to attack. at some point to defend their territory, because that's a resource. That is their resource. The amount of capacity the forest will deliver to the group of chimps, that capacity will determine how much of a territory it is, how large that territory is. So if you've got lots, if the fruit is very, if the forest is very bountiful, if I can put it that way, if it's got a good carrying capacity with large amounts of fruits and things, then the territory will become a lot smaller that they have to look after. So it's all about the carrying capacity of the forest to keep to sustain the size of the family. That is how they determine their territory size. And so we can, this is just in a rainforest like this, you can see a lot of signs of other animals. And you're looking for trails, you're looking for game trails that move through it, because it's so dense that it's impossible to just pick a direction. If you start going off a trail and you're just walking directly through the forest, it's take you hours to get through it. It's so dense. It's not full of thorns. It's very lush, very dense. You struggle to move through it. So the game trails are really the way that the poachers are moving around, and also a lot of the, how these chimps are so, how they can find signs of other animals so easily would be these game trails, because everything moves on it. Anyway, I'm just blabbing now right now.
That there's some signs that they actually traverse this forest through the little bush trails. But I think I found one of the pressures that's causing their demise. Right over here. The Central African Republic has got about 27 million hectares of forest covered area, but it loses 29,000 hectares a year of primary forest.
This is the result of our ever-increasing demand for good quality wood. The worldwide demand for wood is 4.4 billion cubic meters annually. Forests are home to 2/3 of all terrestrial species. Thus, the impact of logging is astounding.
Not even to mention the fact that these roads are giving the poachers easier access to hunt the animals, which is where the pressure is coming from. So I'm on my way to go find that logging camp. It looks like this logging road just leads to more depot points. There are literally thousands of primary forest trees stacked up at such points as this one. All of these trees are destined for the US and the European market, not for the local furniture market here in Central African Republic.
We, in the podcast, we will cover something on, as a topic, we'll cover deforestation. It's one of the most important things to combat or to fight or to push against. With modern technology, it really isn't necessary for us to even use wood for furniture anymore. And the wood specifically that is being harvested out of the rainforest is primary trees. Those are the trees that have, very old trees. They're very, it's a very, I would say it's the wood has become dense. It's sought after. It's valuable, and the size of these trees are they enormous. I mean, the size of a truck. There's trucks that I've seen that it would carry just one tree. That is how, you would see logging trucks and it'll have plenty of cut pieces. These primary trees would be one cut would go on an entire truck. So you can imagine how big that is. And that is, this is primarily as the road is progressing. They're going into the forest, the machines, they're cutting out just those big trees and they're leaving the smaller ones out there that you can see there in the background. And that has an enormous impact on the ecosystem in those forests, because number one, you're cutting out a lot of, you're destroying how the forest works. These forests are incredibly dark underneath the canopy. There's very little sunlight that punches through it, because those primary trees are just creating a dense canopy. You're removing that, so you're changing a variable inside, or a functioning element inside that forest, how it functions. Secondly, those thin trees, they're not very strong. Those young trees, those are young trees, they grow very quick. And they surprisingly quick, but they surprisingly weak as a piece as a tree. I mean, they break quite easily. I was surprised to see how many how many of them were falling over because of storms coming through, or things like that. They snap in half. It's weird to see that. You wouldn't expect it. So primary trees, that's what people want. It's destroying the ecosystem. It's affecting the ecology, the animals and everything else that lives inside those forests, and we've got to push back against one of those pressures, definitely. It's not required for you to go into a very fancy furniture shop and try and demand or try and look for the most expensive table if you know where that wood's coming from. And the more expensive that table is, not necessarily the handiwork that's made it expensive, but what type of wood has been used. And these, if it's something incredible like these trees, then it's gonna have a price tag to it. Modern technology, it's really replaced wood to be used as a form of furniture, and we can use other stuff. It really isn't necessary to.
You can hear the chainsaws buzz in the background. So work is still going on, and this forest is being decimated.
Laurent, Eugene's local guide, knows of a pygmy tribe in the area that hunts in the forest to supplement their food supply.
Fantastic. This is really exciting. It seems that we've come across a few hunters, and my guide has negotiated the fact that we can go with him into the forest. So let's get moving.
Very interesting. The general language, I would say, not general language, the universal language for greeting is showing your hands always like this. You'll see always like the people will show their hands like this. Where this comes from, it eventually changed. It's a little bit of common knowledge here is that why we do handshakes is the fact that to show your hands that you're not carrying a weapon. And when you get to places like this, they don't really do handshakes. They show their hands like this, as a form of greeting. So where it comes from is to know whether you're a threat or not. It's just general knowledge I'm giving.
The Baka Pygmies, like other pygmy groups, are a hunter-gatherer people and traditionally
Tiny
nomadic.
people, by the way.
But the demise of the rainforests also impact on them. Their traditional hunting areas are getting smaller, and they are slowly being forced into a more sedentary existence.
So I'm going to see today what are these people living off, how are they actually finding the species that they need, and then from there determine whether they actually have a huge impact in the forest or not. Show us what does he want to do?
So I spent a lot of time in Gabon with pygmy tribes, and I got to know their hunting techniques and what kind of pressures they put on the forest. And I can tell you now that most of the organizations would be on the same page to say that these tribes live quite sustainably with the environment because they don't have access. There's a whole bunch of factors. Number one is that they don't have the medical access or the resources, so they also they're not expanding at the same rate as other populations would. But they also the tribe is really, the size of the tribe is really at their sustainment level. They'd move on to other areas if they have to, but mostly tribes are sustainable. they're not the reason there's chimpanzees being sold on the markets. It's the culprits that you could point the finger at would be commercial hunters. These guys are coming in with vehicles, shotguns, automatic weapons. It's not these people.
I'm
going to show you how we work in the bush. If we go to the bush, so we look for the print food.
Okay, looking for tracks.
Tracks. Like clay. That is animal.
Yes.
That's the animal. So they start from there, running inside, you see.
Ah, then it loosens up. Okay. All right.
And I came with them.
And then you kill it.
The survival 101. If you got to survive out of the forest, those are tools that you can make really quickly, easily out of the brush.
You can see the technique here is completely different from what you would expect from commercial hunting, where they use rifles,
I kind of wanted to see
weapons to be able
if they,
shoot whatever
back
they
then
see.
when I
These
did this
pygmy
trip,
tribe uses
kind of wanted to see what they were hunting, what they were living
this
off.
obviously would make the success rate a lot lower to try and get the amount of kills necessary. You can imagine the result will be quite different if someone comes in here with an automatic rifle and starts shooting whatever he can see. And that's probably why there's so little animals left in this forest. It's not just the pygmy that hunts here, it's the commercial hunters as well.
Okay, first off, you should be noticing that they are pretty much just hunting for rodents, for small creatures that might be walking on the bush trail, and the dogs would, the role that they're playing there would pretty much to be tracking down these little traps that are all over the place, and they'd know if a rodent was caught up in one of these nets. But it's such a sad case. If you think about, this is what these people are living off, is both the fruits that the forests are providing, but their protein is coming from eating rodents. It's sad to me. I think it's not an existence that I would want to ponder. So one has to you have to have respect for a tribe like this to continue their existence inside such harsh conditions. I think what I was trying to illustrate there was, my respect for the tribes is how tough their existence is, and that they're not the ones that's applying the pressure to the forest. I really did have a lot of beef with the commercial hunters. At this point, it's been a couple of years of me traveling to these tough places. I've seen these hunters, I've met them, these commercial guys. They're the same people, or they're attracted to the same benefits, I would say, as that you would find here in the Kruger National Park and those places where they go in for the rhino horns, other places, ivory. They're former soldiers, they people that were recruited, not always soldiers, but they were young men recruited by some organization that lured them with money, with the benefits the financial benefits that they'll get by doing this illegal stuff, and they cause enormous harm to the environment because they're just mowing down whatever the target is that they're looking for. And the chimpanzees, for example, most of it's going to go to bushmeat, and then the couple of infants will be sold for thousands of dollars on the markets because they are exploiting what the expatriates are feeling for these animals. So they know where these mining towns are operating, or these cities, where these companies operate that have a lot of engineers or expatriates working there, oil companies or whatever. And if the people go to these markets, they know that they'll be there. So they're charging thousands of dollars, and they are milking it. They want the animal to go nuts so that they can, extort them for money. That's just the way it works. There's zero respect there for those people.
I got an urgent phone call last night, and the gist of it is that the parcel did not leave Bangui for the laboratory in the Netherlands yet. Now I gotta get down there to try and sort out this problem. So I've got the team here, and they're gonna help me load Claudine. We're gonna hit the road. Right, guys, let's go. Come on, let's go.
Although it is a happy day for Claudine, it is also a sad day for the people that raised her and cared so deeply for her.
Now, there are some things to take into consideration when you leave a place like this. Claudine has been here for quite some time, and a lot of these guys took really good care of her, and that's why she's such a great chimp. She's got a great personality, she's physically in a good condition, and I have to thank them for being so nice, making sure that I'm able to take her out today. And I also want to say to them that I'll take good care of her. If everything goes well, she'll be part of a big family who's going to start a whole new life, a life that she should have had if she wasn't removed from the wild. Can you thank him for me?
Ok, merci.
Thank you.
On a bata Claudine, bete la de. On a gwe, on a bata Claudine, quoi.
Thank you. And I hear you're the real hero. You're the guy. She's a child, huh? Thank you very much. I'll take good care of her. Please tell her.
Ok, bata lo. Bata lo, Johnny Ming, and the sort of it.
This was a major gamble on my part.
All right, hit the road.
I took the risk to move Claudine. I took a big risk moving Claudine to Bangui, that long hour drive, 13-hour drive to move her to Bangui, because she's being moved from the cage that she lived in, away from the people who were taking care of her. And there obviously wasn't the knowledge. You know, sometimes when animals get moved, you know, it's not that the people want to take them back. You've got to be successful. I've been in situations in Angola, for example, where we're on the verge of moving the animals and we can't get the permit sorted. And it ends up being a nightmare because the animals are being crated or already are in crates, and you've got to take them out of the crate and put them back in a cage. Now, that is dramatic for people. That's traumatic for us doing the work. And it's not a case that you want to face. So you've got to kind of be sure that you're going to get this done. But I was aware of the pressures on this specific mission to be successful. I moved the animal with me to Bangui and to be successful. So it was all riding on those blood results and making sure that she wasn't, you know, that it would be successful. But there was no guarantee. I mean, how do I know if she's got simian AIDS or not? If she's got any of the diseases that she's being tested for? No way to know it.
We've got 13 hours to spend on the back of this truck, but I don't hear Claudine complaining at all. She keeps on staring up at the forest like it's some foreign place, or maybe she's wondering if her friends or family are still out there. She's been absent for more than 3 years from this wonderful place, and you gotta feel sad for her, but also happy that she's actually gonna travel to a place that is almost as good.
It was such a gorgeous, you know, I gotta say that it was the shittiest road I've
Although it
ever
is
driven.
illegal, commercial
But
hunters and locals
what a
alike,
magnificent
mostly driven by
experience
abject poverty,
traveling
are
through the
still
rainforest.
hunting chimps and other primates.
Such a beautiful forest.
Okay, what we just found is we stopped next to the road, and the remains of Gwenan is displayed on the side, obviously wanting to sell it. Now this is the difference. I mean, you can. This is the meat version of it. Once it's been hunted, monkey, and that's the Claudine is the lucky one sitting in the cage over there. Now, what must these people be thinking? They can see us transporting a live chimpanzee. Do they want to kill it? Do they think it should become this? And how do you bring the message across that we should be saving them when this is what you see every single day?
This is the predicament, right? This is how we've got to find that silver bullet somehow. Education is the way. Being able to communicate with people, to communicate the message that some resources are not renewable. Some things if you take some things out of the environment, then there's going to be consequences. Law enforcement will always be one of the primary pillars to stop the commercial side, or the bad guys, if you want to put it that way, the ones that would come and benefit financially from that. But secondly, education is probably the most important thing that would change the world for a better place. Kids being able to learn about the resources, how the ecology works, why it's important to sustain the environment, why you can't just go about doing whatever you want to the environment. So education, and I'm asked the question there. It's rough to see that. I've seen a lot of rougher things, guys. In Gabon, I would drive with a vehicle, and it'd be a guy walking with a gorilla head under his arm, like you would carry a soccer ball. That would take its toll on you to see that kind of stuff. And I don't really know what to say. It just it's something that we got to deal with.
Back in Bangui, it's Claudine that needs some distraction, and Eugene spends some quality time with her, playing and bonding.
What she's doing is very typical of chimp behavior. If you really want to understand chimps, you got to understand their eyes. I keep my eye on her eyes. I look at what she's looking at. When I see she's looking at my hand, I know she's going to grab. She's going to grab and she's going to pull closer. And then what I do is I respond with the other hand. And just in a playful way. But my point is that if you don't understand their eyes and what...
I guess that was just a playful way of trying to bring across communication with chimps. Windows, eyes are the windows to the soul. It's a very important thing that applies to chimpanzees. They're incredibly bad liars. Their coat would come up if they have disingenuous intentions, or bad intentions, if you want to put it that way. And also, eyes are so important. You can see what's going on. It's eventually, if you spend enough time with them, and you learn to read their mannerisms, and especially how they what they're looking at, what they're focusing on, what the intentions become very clear. So communication and eye contact is incredibly important to be able to survive around them, I would say. Most of the experts I know have lost limbs, digits or something, simply because you took your eye off the animal for a second, and you misunderstood the fact that they didn't attack you. They had the intention to be aggressive, but maybe waited for the right moment, and you misunderstood the whole situation, and it's over in a second, and something is gone. So I've spoken about it in one of the other podcasts, and I'm not going to talk about it again, but that's part of the reason that that you would be, if you were going to be doing the hands-on work with animals, you have to respect and understand their form of communication. If you want to be good at it and survive, then you're going to have to master it.
All right, Phil, I'll speak to you in a couple of hours. Cheers. Now, I might have arrived safely with Claudine here in Bangui, but we have a very serious problem. The blood samples have not left with the courier company yet. And because of that, we might miss our charter flight, and by process of elimination, miss our commercial flight out of Entebbe to South Africa. The only thing I can do right now is to make sure that Claudine is happy for a couple of days, and then I can continue my investigation in Bangui.
Being the capital, Bangui is the hub of economic activity, and if there is a meat market to be found, this is where it would be. The most basic of food items are sold here. There are no luxuries sold that resemble a flourishing economy. It is just the basic foods such as rice and beans, only necessities to survive.
There are three different ways you could end up in CAR if you're an animal like Claudine. The first way is as bushmeat. The commercial hunters go into the forests, they shoot as much as they can, they smoke the meat and they bring it to this market right up ahead. The second way is if you're too small, you don't have a meat value, you've got plenty of value as a live exotic animal. You also get sold in the market, but most likely you'll go on to another market in Lebanon or anywhere else. The third way is if you're lucky enough, you can get rescued by an organization like the Jane Goodall Institute.
At these meat markets, the smell and stench of dead chimp meat is both disturbing and nauseating. It's difficult to comprehend why people kill chimps and crocodiles and other species that are supposedly under protection. One could only speculate as to why it is not cattle, chickens or goats. Here, conservation is a luxury that they simply cannot afford.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on.
Knowing that they are dealing in illegal goods, they quickly cut Eugene's investigation short, but the evidence of a flourishing bushmeat market is clearly there.
All right, we got chased off there. The guys, the traders in the market really aren't happy with us.
So let me just explain there. When I said in the episode there that my investigation, it was pretty much I had contact with the conservation officials. They were actually with me. You saw them a little bit earlier in the episode. One of the officials was in transit with us back from the mining town, and he was investigating that Gwenan that was killed at the bushmeat, and nothing you can do about it. But I mean, you could just confiscate it or whatever. I don't really know what kind of actions they would take, but the fact is that they went with me too. They just weren't in the scene there, but they were with me at the market, and they could investigate that at any time. They don't need me, but I just wanted to point that out. I wanted to get it on camera so I can give them the evidence and say, listen, you can see the animals are here. You can see this is what's being done. So the commercial traders are using those roads to get deeper into the rainforest. They shoot as much as they can. They smoke it, they take it back. Now, the specific animals are very limited. They're not going to necessarily smoke and sell buck, but at a cultural sense there, and this is where we can't be hypocritical about this. It's the same way Japan still values whale meat and it being part of their culture. Here, the meat is sold by the gram, and it's got cultural and spiritual meaning to the buyer. It's not, I wouldn't call it witchcraft, they call it traditional medicine. And the custodians of this skill or art to be able to create this traditional medicine, they sell it as a healing. Some of this, some of the meats have got healing properties to it. It is, like I said, sold by the gram, cooked into some form of a soup thing, consumed by the people. In South Africa, you're not going to like this, but even in our country, some of the cultures still consume. You find this on a regular basis where there are raids done on some of these traditional healers, and they use body parts for consumption as part of the spiritual and cultural meanings of it. So it's pretty much cannibalism that still happens, that can happen. I have a lot of respect for different cultures and religions, specific cultures, not religions, but cultures I've got a lot of respect for. I'd like interacting and having people have their space and living and enjoying and practicing their cultures and continuing on to try and protect it. So from my perspective, education is the answer, and law enforcement is the answer, where when the tipping point happens in specific resources, that the education should have eliminated that we never get to the tipping point. And number two, law enforcement be able to enforce that the commercial hunters aren't successful in doing what they're doing. So that's the backstory on why the bushmeat trade is still flourishing and for what reason it's being used.
The last couple of days, I've really seen the size of the problem here in the Central African Republic. But we received some good news. So Dean's results came out negative. They informed us, and this is ecstatic because it means we can pack her up, go to the airport, and get her back to the sanctuary in South Africa. All right.
A little trick that I learned in Sudan, tying up the rope around the neck of the whatever leash that they have around their neck, and then taking it through the crate.
Picking up
It's
on
not
the good
actually that you're
news,
pulling in the
Claudine
animal.
wastes no
What
time
happens is,
in
as
getting
soon as you
into her
put a little bit of
transport
pressure on that line, the
now
chimp
tightly
wants to
secured.
attack, wants to get that line off their leash. And so, you know, it's just such a simple process to get the animal to
I'm
get
just
into the
glad that
crate.
she went in. There's a couple of bananas
No-
in there. There's a bottle of water. I think she's,
No
she's
violence,
starting to dig in.
no animal
And,
abuse
makes me
required.
think that this is going to be home for quite some time. At least until we get to the sanctuary.
Just a nice upbeat tone. You guys don't know what the backstory is in the background going on right there, right now. We'll get to it.
Alright,
It was far from it, being upbeat and positive.
Leaving Bangui for the last time, she and Eugene head for the airport and a new beginning.
It's quite a big relief for me to sit in this cockpit right now. I mean, I've seen some pretty horrible things at CAR. To have seen all those primary trees cut down, the bushmeat trade, the illegal trade in endangered species going on, it was very upsetting. And to be quite honest, I don't know what the solutions are. Yes, there should be more international pressure on CAR. There should be a larger amount of financial resources being put in to conservation and to law enforcement. Those are the key issues. It will only come with a lot of international pressure. Claudine is in the back of this aircraft. There are so many we left behind. I'm just hoping that this single chip will be a statement that things can get better.
I think that's where the episode ends anyway. Yeah, all right, so time for my final remarks. It was a good speech. I know, even if I say it myself, that kind of encapsulated what the mission is and what the, you know, we can't act like we have all the answers, that, you know, I'll know 100% what the solutions are to try and solve the problems. But I can tell you that the pressures are real in some places, in some countries. But it's not a message of doom and gloom for me anymore. I think that was the important thing, is if you're going to travel to places like Bangui all the time, then that's going to be your perception of reality. But if you travel to other places where they've got their things sorted out, where they've got their the pressures sorted out, then you get a different perspective. And that is where my headspace is now. Now, just to give you an idea on, you know, I think the producers of this episode, of this series concept, call it The Lost Tape, but it was actually a concept show, a synopsis, or we want to call it that, which prove, you know, a test episode to see if we would continue with this. But it was very upbeat. It was very positive. In the end here, where the reality was very different. We were sitting in a coffee shop having something. There was actually a coffee shop, and Bangui's not that far behind. Suddenly there's Land Cruisers with 20mm autocannons and stuff, tacticals rolling through the streets, and conflict broke out on the eastern edge of the city. So all hell broke loose, and got a phone call. Somebody wanted me to get the hell out. We got to the airport. It was already deserted. The customs officials and the veterinarians, they were gone. We had all the paperwork we needed, but also my experience in dealing with these situations, and having, you know, the Sudan episode, if you guys ever watched that, you would know that that was a very desperate situation. And CITES actually has a process for this, that you could have a pre-approved permit, export permit, so you can get out of a conflict zone like this. And I had already arranged for that. I already had the export permit arranged. It was in my possession, so I could just get onto the plane. There was nobody there. So we got onto the plane and we got out and we got to Entebbe. If I didn't have the experience that I did at that point, we wouldn't have been successful. It would have just broken down. We would have been stuck in that conflict. We would have had to leave the chimp behind, get on the plane and get out, even if we were able to take off. So experience did solve the day at the end there. So experience is important. But when we got to Entebbe, there's a big backstory on Uganda on its own, because it's a hub. It's a regional hub for the UN for it's a big airport, a lot of commercial stuff going through there. It's a hub for the region. Even the CIA operates out of Entebbe with the Pilatus PC-12 called Cobra 1. Met them at one time as well. So I think that the backstory is when we landed there, but it is. When I landed there was a couple of guys with AKs waiting for us, customs officials, parks officials. They knew we were going to arrive. And even though the paperwork was 100%, there was this head honcho lady that came out and made a big spectacle of me arriving there with a permit that wasn't stamped by the official in CAR, and me trying to explain that this is why the system exists the way it does. Is something goes wrong, we're able to exit a conflict zone, and that the paperwork's legit. They can call up and they can do whatever they want, but it's legit. And I got berated to a large degree, a very public spectacle on the tarmac there with all of the soldiers, police, and whatever else they had. There were probably 20, 30 people there. And, it was a racial attack that I shouldn't be bringing my colonial systems here and try and tell them how to do their jobs. I should take my chimp and bugger off back to CIO so I can go get the right paperwork, and she doesn't care whether there's a conflict or not, and I got to stick to how they want things there. It lasted for about 10 minutes of screaming match going on and berating me. Walked off and then stamped my paperwork and let me go. It was fine. I mean, there's nothing to keep me there, but I just went completely dark at one point. Blacked out, where I could just see myself strangling this person. So I realized that my time was up in the job. That I was going to spend my time in a jail for doing something that I shouldn't have done. Strangling some corrupt official. I've done it too many times to have to deal with these officials to realize that they are on a power trip and they abusing their position that they kept in. A lot of these are communist hangovers, where former freedom fighters or socialists or whatever. This is how these countries existed. Is got their freedom as getting into socialism, and then eventually getting back to some form of dictatorship or whatever. And you'll find these corrupt officials were former soldiers, and then they get into these positions, and then they are just there to abuse the hell out of it. Whether they are corrupt, trying to get money out of you, so that they will let you go, or they're threatening you with delaying the process to such an extent that the animal will suffer. And you're dealing with an unknown situation that's going to end up in corrupt money being exchanged in order to save an animal's life, which by all means should be their job. They should be the ones taking care of their own resources. It's their countries. And why should I be the one to keep on dealing with this problem? So it is a conflicting situation, and maybe that's for a new person to take up the mantle and continue on with that. And I'm sure somebody else will decide to do that at one point. I don't think you're going to get answers out of someone like the UN. I had a big powwow with the UN in CAR as well. I met their conservation office there, and they both have access. They have access to resources, aircraft. They have conservation officials. They in contact with the government, and my conversation with them there about why isn't more being done to to stop the problem there is they don't want to make any waves with the government. So what is their role? How, I don't see the UN in the current structure that they've, in any place that I've been in Africa, in one of these conflict zones or where they operate, I have not seen them being able to solve anything more than the fact that they're just causing more problems than they are solving them. So I don't believe in the UN, and I haven't believed in them for a long time. I'm sorry to say that for a lot of people that think that that have idealistic opinions, that think that the organization like the UN is what allows peace to flourish. I think you need to spend more time on the front line to see exactly what the consequences are, or if the UN is actually doing what they should be doing, and if they're actually solving the problems that they should be solving, and if it needs fixing as an organization or the dissolvement or whatever. It's not my job to try and give you answers on that. But I do know that my time is up in dealing with those people and with corrupt officials. I don't have to do that anymore. All right, so in a nutshell, it was a tough situation getting out of it, and I was very glad to make it back. It was the fastest rescue mission that I've ever done, an animal that I extracted from a place and brought back to South Africa, and she's doing well. So, yeah, that's the end of it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I had my little rant there in the end. I think you guys are going to have to get used to me having strong opinions and saying whatever I want. Whatever my experience is, I don't have to hold back. It's nobody that is going to give me an issue. All right, there's the reason why this episode is going out today is because bad weather blew in, and I did promise a more action-packed, high-octane tracking episode of what you would do in an escape situation, but the weather is keeping that back, and also limitations on being able to film it. So we'll get on that as soon as the weather allows. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed it, and got any questions? This will be a live broadcast anyway, so not a live broadcast, but commentary. I'll be available for that when it goes up. See you on the next one.